Imagine preparing for months, securing the best speakers, exhibitors, marketing to attendees, and then 24 hours before your event, the call has to be made and you have to postpone. A storm. Out of your control, no backup, nothing you can do. This is the exact situation I found myself in. And in today's world, whether you're leading a team or an organization, unpredictability has become the norm. And in times like these, adaptability is not just a skill, it's a lifeline. Welcome back to Nkoyo Unscripted, your weekly dose of unfiltered insights at the intersection of law, leadership, and learning. If you're new to me, I'm your host, Nkoyo, lawyer, futurist, mom, sometimes politician, out here really trying to help you unscript your thinking so we can lead change that dramatically shifts our systems and ensures that each and every one of us thrive. And today we are absolutely going to contend with the need for all of us as leaders to demonstrate a greater skill when it comes to being adaptable. And so today in this solo episode, I'm going to share some strategies that I think are very useful, some lessons learned from this very recent experience that I had having to postpone a 2-day conference. Lots of money lost, but lives secured and safe. We're often in a place where you don't have the answer, you don't know, you're really just trying to do the best that you can do with the information that you have available to you. And sometimes that means that you have to pivot on a pin. You have to, sometimes you get caught slipping like I did. We literally did not have a contingency plan. And so there were 5 really big takeaways that I got from that experience that I want to share with you here that are applicable, useful for leaders everywhere, particularly in a world that is existing in a lot of change, a lot of rapid change, accelerating change. And so we know that change is constant. The rate of change is accelerating. And we have to hone that super skill of being adaptable, figuring out how to adjust so that we can continue to lead through uncertainty, through challenging times. And, I actually have a whole training on this around disruption and how to navigate it with courage, confidence, and clarity. So I'll share some things from that. But I also just want to let you know, right? You can join us in the Leadership Revolt, which is where we share weekly insights that coincide with the podcast. So definitely subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already. But also inside of our community, right? We are really making sure that we're equipping leaders with future skills. Because again, the past is gone, right? The future is here. And the only thing we have to do, the only place we can bet on is that the future will come, whether we're prepared for it or not. And so we're doing as much as we can to future-proof. And one of those things, I think, is being not just a visionary leader, not just a disruptive leader, but also an adaptable and resilient leader, because change is going to happen and we have to figure out how we're modeling that and managing that for our teams. So I have a few things, strategies for leading through change. I know many of you who are listening are in positions, maybe you're executive directors, running businesses, you might be senior leadership, board members, etc. And so you're in positions where, based on the nature of your job, you're kind of fighting the status quo, even if you haven't really identified that that's what you're doing. You are trying to shift systems. You are trying to make sure that people who've not always been included or had a voice have such, which is disruptive work. And I know some people don't like that language. It feels uncomfortable. One of the things I like, I don't know where it was, but I talk about it in the talk that I do, is that disruption isn't revolution, it's rapid evolution. And as we grow, as things change, as things evolve, it is going to disrupt the status quo. It's going to disrupt things that we've always done. And we have to, as leaders, be comfortable with that. In my opinion, lean into that a lot more right now, because we got a lot of things happening in the world that we really need to step up and speak to. Because honestly, it's not that people are ignoring it, right? There's a level of frustration if you think about politics. If you think about capitalism, et cetera, there's a level of frustration that is existing in the world with people feeling like stuff that we've been told isn't working out, right? There's always the running joke that like adulting is a scam. It's like it looked so different when I was younger. I was like, Mom, my parents tell my parents all the time, like, I feel like you made this look really easy, and it's wild out here, right? This is some wild stuff that we're living through in a very challenging time in life, if we're honest. And so it is, incumbent upon us to, as leaders, help navigate, help people see the way, go the way, show the way, so that we can ultimately exist in a more stable, inclusive world. So here are 5 key strategies for leading through change that came up again for me with this very moment of having to postpone something that I have been working on for like almost a year. Talk to me if that's ever been you. I want to know if you've ever sort of been in this place. But here are 5 things that I came up with, probably 6 because your girl loves things. So first, acknowledging your emotions. I think that that's the biggest thing that we often miss when it comes to leading change, when it comes to having to navigate change, is the emotional component of that. And there's a great book, Cassandra Worthy. She wrote from Change Enthusiasm. Great book that really talks about harnessing emotions as sort of like a superpower to help you manage change. And what a lot of people ignore about change is that we all have our resistance to it biologically, right? It's not even just like, oh, people don't want to change, they're lazy or whatever. It's not. Like our bodies actually, our mind, etc., tries to protect us from change. And so we have to acknowledge that anytime change happens, there are going to be emotions. And so acknowledging those emotions for yourself, first and foremost, as a leader, I think is really important, and acknowledging the energy that you're bringing into the space when you're dealing with change, right? Like there was a level of frustration for me that everybody was looking to me to make the final call. When I'm like, you run a whole organization here, you got a whole build, like, are you literally going to make staff come in and all these people come in because there's one program going on? That doesn't make sense. But nobody wanted to be, it appeared as though no one wanted to be the one to say, we're just calling it. It's not going to happen. Sorry, Nkoyo, whatever, right? I literally was standing in a room where all eyes were on me. And it was like, well, Nkoyo, what do you want to do? Right? I want us to be safe. That's what I want to do. Like, I want to make the reasoned decision. This isn't optimal. So there's a level of frustration about just the process by which we got there. Frustration with myself at not having a contingency plan. Because I'm going to tell you, it was not on my radar at all. I don't know why I didn't think to check the weather the week of or any of those things, because this conference has had a number of external factors that have impacted it in the past. So I was a little frustrated at myself, disappointed at myself that I was caught flat-footed in this situation, that I didn't have a contingency plan. But I know and I feel confident that I made the right decision. But I spent, that entire day running around trying to do PR, people asking questions like, why did it take so long for you all to decide? Like, we've already sent people to Atlanta, like, oh, I'm in the air, 54,000 feet in the air. There's nothing, like inopportune, not the greatest place to be in. But I knew as a leader, I was confident in the decision that I made. I understood why I was making it. It was clear and connected with the vision and values of what we do in my department, period. So, and I actually feel like shout out to running for office twice, because I'm like, man, I'm used to being grilled with some tough questions and having to respond on the fly. And so I found myself figuring out how to message around that and making sure that people had some of the information that they needed to make the next best decision that they could make. The next thing I would say beyond, and I want to also land this plane about acknowledging your emotions, because just as you may be feeling emotions about it and carrying those emotions into the way that you talk about the change and how you're going to shift and what the next steps are, contingencies, etc., your team, your stakeholders, etc., also have emotions about that. And as a leader, you have to figure out the balance of how you manage your emotions and the emotions of others. I am a licensed attorney, and so in law school we talked a lot about the reasonable man and this whole premise that we think that people make decisions based on logic, and it's not true. From running a business and seeing how much psychology and all stuff has to do with like how we decide based on emotions and then use confirmation bias to like justify our decisions. There is no such thing as the quote unquote reasonable man. Most of us are emotional beings, whether we acknowledge it or not. And we make decisions through and with our emotions, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I'm actually reading Limitless by Jim Quick right now. And we're talking about, he talks a lot about brain science and how you can use your brain to really create the life that we want, that we are all really limitless. We don't have the types of barriers that we think that we do. And so he talks a lot about, our second brain. Our second brain is in our stomach, in the gut, and how sometimes we have, in a lot of places, we've been taught to ignore that second brain, which might give us just an intuition, an inkling, a hunch, go here, a hesitation, don't do that, right? But a lot of times we're taught to ignore it, but that there's actually connectivity. I won't get into all the science of it. I'm not going to nerd out on you on that, but that there is like connection between your brain, your gut, and your heart around how we process and do things. And so I do want to encourage you to think about the emotional aspect of any change, both for yourself and for the people that you are leading, especially when you got to pivot on a pin, right? Like, this was not the plan. I am one, I'm going to be honest, I'm not spontaneous. I don't actually love spontaneity unless it's like planned and I kind of have an idea that's coming. So obviously, clearly not spontaneous. So sometimes having to make a decision on the fly or pivot on the fly is challenging for me personally. And so knowing that about myself, I have to give myself a process because life is life. Ever since I done had these children, I mean, you never know. You never know. So first thing I just want you to make sure you know is you're acknowledging your emotions and the emotions of those around you, because they absolutely impact any type of change management, any type of change process that you're leading. There are emotions to it, which might account for why some people are really eager and excited to do some things and other people are resistant or passive aggressive about it. So acknowledge the emotions. They're there. They matter. Second, embrace agility over perfection. So for all of y'all who are out there who, like me, are perfectionists or recovering perfectionists, I want you to give yourself space to not be perfect, to do it messy, to take messy action at times and figure it out later, because you're 1,000% capable and competent to do that. But sometimes in the moment, you just have to adjust, and it might not be beautiful. If you have the foresight, which I wish I had, to have planned a contingency plan in case there was a weather occurrence or, whatever it might be in your work, great. Plan, for the planners, have your plan, but recognize that the plan may not go as you wanted to, and perfection isn't the goal. So it is okay. What we're really looking for is progress. Leaders who are adaptable know that plans rarely go perfectly, and that's okay. It's really about moving forward with flexibility. I actually feel like motherhood has really pushed me to figure out flexibility, because, you might have your whole work schedule planned and then somebody's sick and now all of that is out the window, right? And you have to figure out how you move through the moment, take imperfect action to make progress. And so I want you to break up with perfection and seek out progress instead. How can you move even 1% forward despite this not being the way that you had desired or planned? The third thing that I think is really important, that's probably why I didn't get a whole bunch of hate mail yet. Maybe it might be coming. I didn't open my inbox again after the weekend, is that you maintain clear communication. And this doesn't mean that you have to know everything or all the answers, right? We've had people reaching out like, when is it going to be rescheduled? What about this? What about that? How am I going to get my stuff back? If they were exhibitors who mailed and shipped things to us to set up their booths, then we didn't have all the answers. We don't. And I was candid about that. Here's what we know. Here's what we're still trying to figure out. Here's the next step. Here's how we're going to communicate with everyone about the rescheduling of this date, or what these things are. I encouraged my team, because I was like, I know we're going to get 5011 questions. Let's try to anticipate all the questions that people might have about what's next and create a frequently asked questions so that, one, we as a team could have some normed language around how we're going to respond. And two, that we could actually post it places so that folks don't have to rely on a phone call or an email or something. They can actively go and see on the website, like, hey, we know we've thought about this in this moment about how we want to respond. And so we're putting that out there. The thing too is that in times of change, silence breeds confusion and anxiety. Nobody, very few people, I won't say nobody, enjoy change. And so it's really important that we are communicating as much as is necessary at the point in time when we're leading change. Transparency, even if you don't know everything, builds trust, and you want to make sure that you are maintaining trust while you are leading change. I think people can feel all kinds of ways about the process, but nobody likes to feel like they're in the dark, like things are being hidden from them, etc. They don't want to grow anxious or confused or concerned. And so as much as you can give people information and the necessary amount of information, I see all the time, because even in some of the consulting work that I do, I see people want to over communicate things to people. And sometimes, and I was like this myself, so I totally get it, right? You want to cover all the bases. Maybe you're feeling insecure or not sure, and so you tend to say more. Sometimes that is helpful. A lot of times it's not. So I think, try to say the thing that you need to say in the most concise way can be the most helpful. There's a great book. It's called Writing Without Bullshit. That's the title. It's not my fault. It is really helpful about helping you to cut the fluff and say what needs to be said. And you can do that with tact. I think people always assume that, like, if you are direct, you're rude, or you're, it's inappropriate. And that is not the case. There's another really great book, How to Talk to Anyone, that gives you different scenarios around, like, how to talk to anyone, how to say anything. I forget which book I had read a really long time ago when I was a baby professional and I was charged with coaching other teachers. And your girl didn't know what she was doing. And I was having difficulty communicating because I wanted to keep it 100, but some folks it was too much for them. And then I would try to soften it, and other people just didn't think I was serious, right? And so I had to learn. I also had a lot of conflict on my team when I was being managed about how I engaged. And so I read this book. I'll have to go find it. I know I have it somewhere. But it really talked about how you have difficult conversations. That might be the name of the book. Sorry, I look over to the side because that's where I have a crazy bookshelf. But difficult conversations, I think that was what it is. But it's basically you can say anything to anyone. It's really how you say it and really making sure that your intent and the impacts match up. And a lot of times we have great intent, but the way it lands, nobody heard it because we didn't really think about the delivery of the message. But essentially, you can give people bad news. And when I was practicing law, I often had to give people bad news. But it's the way that you give that information to them that makes the difference. And so even if you don't know everything, there's still a way to message around that so that people get the amount of information that they need, that you can be honest and have integrity in the information that you're communicating, and people can continue on in the process. The fourth thing that I think is really important for us to grow as adaptable leaders, a future skill, a necessary skill, is to cultivate a growth mindset. Nkoyo, what do you mean? I'm not going to get in all to the Carol Dweck, growth versus fix, but what I will say is disruption can be an opportunity. When the world shut down with the pandemic and everyone was jittered, freaking out, right? How are we going to do this? I was practicing law at the time, representing families in education matters. Schools were like, what are we going to do? I had a lot of IEP students for the longest time. They wouldn't just give us the documents electronically, even though they made them on the computers. It's totally insane. But we can't do that. We have to print it out and put it in your kid's backpack and send it to you. I don't know why, but that was what a lot of people felt. And so there was this whole hoopla of well, what are we going to do if now we're going to send these things electronically? We can't put it in book bags. Kids are not in schools. What are we going to do? What does curriculum look like? Because now we're not in schools doing this system that hadn't really worked for decades, but we've connected ourselves to it. We've tied ourselves to it. And I said, this is an incredible opportunity for us to reimagine education. Why? Because a global pandemic had never happened before. We've never shut down schools. So there's no right or wrong way to do this. Going back to our earlier point, to break up with perfection and look for progress. Like, what can we do now? How can we show up in this space now, in this new, completely unknown, and design a system that maybe works better, right? But what we tried to do is just like take what we do in the classroom traditionally into the online. And some teachers were really innovative. They figured out how to use technology. They were doing all this really cool stuff online. Others were literally lecturing to people on a screen or just having folks sit in, it was really wild. I got to see it on both sides as an attorney representing families, but also as a parent who had a child who was home during the pandemic. And some hours of the day, they were doing some cool stuff. Others, I was like, is this what y'all do all day? 'Cause this is a problem. But anyway, cultivating a growth mindset is like seeing disruption as a learning opportunity. This is a space where we can figure out, hey, what did we do well? What didn't we do well? What could we do better in the future, right? That's where we're at with my team of like, okay, so this disruption came, it gave us a pause. What are some takeaways from this that are useful that we can help to move forward? What are some things that we want to trash because it didn't really work in the last instance? But it also gives you an opportunity to design a new experience and figure out some additional things that are more impactful in the future. And so if you are an adaptable leader, you can view disruption and challenges as data rather than a roadblock, right? Like, great. So what does that mean? Like, hey, something has happened. It has completely thrown your entire plan off course. What did you do well? What didn't you do? What could you do better? What should you completely trash? What's the new beginning that you can create? How can you pivot from this to fail forward or pivot forward in this instance, right? Every shift offers something we can learn from to grow stronger. And so I, especially in this talk that I do, really try to push people to see disruption, again, as rapid evolution and an opportunity to think differently, think more expansively, think more creatively about things, right? There's a quote that creativity loves constraint, right? So sometimes people get really frustrated when there are a lot of constraints, but it actually allows our brains to get real imaginative about how we design around the constraint or design with the constraint in mind. But you can only do that if you have a growth mindset. If you're fixed, so it's like, hey, this constraint is here, so there's nothing I can do. This is it. Then like that's literally what it will be. But if you're like, how can I use this constraint to move forward or build something new or better or different? Or, if we had a contingency plan, we might have had a virtual option, or I think we're thinking about different ways. Like, I was like, well, could we offer something, even if it can't be the full 2-day, and then do the 2-day again in the spring or some other point, right? Like, how can we navigate around this, and what can we learn from it is useful. The fifth thing that I will say, I'm back and forth because I gotta have 6. But the fifth thing is empower your team. If you have team, this is a great opportunity to delegate. And I know I shared a couple podcasts ago and a couple articles ago about how, we can delegate some resources. Again, if you're not already subscribed to the podcast, subscribe to the newsletter. There's good, valuable, useful information in there. But if you are not already practicing delegation, unpredictability, these events that come up that you're not planned and prepared for, are a great opportunity to work with your team to build some skill and to delegate. But just being able to equip your team to handle uncertainty also is a very powerful skill for those of you who are looking for ways to not just attract quality talent, but retain talent in your industries. One of the things that the data is showing is that people want to be able to advance and be developed, right? So it's not just about money. Are you going to pay me a whole bunch? We do want to pay them equitably. We do want to make sure we're paying livable wages as a bare minimum. But we want to make sure that they're getting something of value in their time. And throughout the pandemic, I think a lot of people, what we saw with the quiet quitting and the great recession, the mass exodus that was happening, was people were like, why am I here? Why am I spending all this time doing this thing that pays me okay? In some instances pays me well, but it really, like, that's not all. People want to advance. They want to develop. As human beings, we look to evolve. That is a part of our biological makeup because we need to survive. It is a survival tactic. So being able to delegate to your team to solve problems with them is really powerful. It also shows that you have a level of trust with them, that you believe in their ability to help bring ideas and problem solve. And so this is a great time to not try to have all the answers yourself, but to actually create environments where your team is empowered to find solutions together. And I think that that's one of the things that I was really appreciative about in this instance. Like I mentioned earlier, I was like, we're probably going to get questions. What questions do you think we're going to get? Great. Now that you think about those questions, how do you think we should answer those questions? Rather than Nkoyo being like, here's everything that I could possibly think could go wrong, and feeling the pressure of that as a leader to hold all of that, we spread it around in the team and we came up with a pretty good document. So I want to encourage you to think of your team members as just that. That's why I don't call them staff. That's why I don't call them your subordinates, etc. These are the people on your team. And for your team to be successful, y'all got to work together and build some skill and work with each other. This leadership training that was at also really talked about how coaching, the coaching leadership model is really, really, really useful right now. Because again, people want more than just money. And we also live in an environment where things are changing rapidly. So we all have to continue to upskill. I always tell my team, and I truly believe this, that you can lead at any level. I might have the title of leader, but that doesn't mean that I'm the only leader on this team. And so I really try to equip my team members to lead where they're at, right? Like, you are in a position of leadership. You're leading yourself, you're leading your household. And so this is a place to build those skills. But I also have to create and cultivate a culture that allows people to be leaders with some coaching and guidance. And so that's number 5 is, empower your team. And number 6, I'm going to throw it out there anyway, and I'm going to land this plane, is just that you want to prepare as much as you can for the unpredictable. And sometimes that preparation doesn't mean that you have a 90-page bullet plan contingency, but even if you have a framework or an approach about how you're going to respond when something that you had no idea or wasn't planning for, wasn't prepared about, happens, can be really helpful. We were building out, when I did this talk about disruption, this disruption-proof playbook that really talks about a framework or an approach to change and unpredictability, because we're not going to be able to anticipate every single change that's going to happen. We're not going to be able to have all the information in front of us, even when the change happens. So it's really figuring out, how do you walk yourself through a process? How do you move through the things that I just talked about here, right? Your own emotions about it. How do you make sure that you are being flexible and agile in the situation? How are you maintaining communication? How are you going to look for opportunities to improve and to prepare for a similar type of experience? What similar experiences happened in the past might you be able to pull from to move yourself forward? How are you going to empower your team to help you solve these problems, right? It's really about creating a framework. And I really say that over like a process and procedure, because sometimes we get stuck on do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in order. And it may be that you do 1 and skip to 7 and then back to 2, etc. And I really want us to get out of this very structured, almost, I won't say it's brainless, but robotic approach to change, and really start to think about, how can I, from a holistic level, create a framework, a process, an approach to navigate what will be a consistent norm in our lives. Leaders who proactively prepare for unpredictability are the ones who thrive, but preparation doesn't look the way that it has in other generations and time. Preparation is really about making sure that you as yourself, as a leader, are centered, and that you have your approach, your framework for how you want to move forward. So again, adaptability is a future skill. It is incredibly important in a fast changing world. And like I have said, you'll hear me say all the time, it is not just that change is constant, it is that the rate of change is accelerating. 2 years ago was the birth of ChatGPT. That is when generative AI came to the forefront for all of us. And there are incredible amounts of things that have completely shifted. I've watched whole businesses be like, oh, I'm not going to coach or show up this way. I'm going to create a GPT and sell that will just like do this work for other people. Like folks are really figuring out and how to do things, businesses, etc. And so we know that change is here. It will continue to be here. Our world is it's election year, so we got a whole lot of change coming our way, but change is here. It is a constant. It is happening faster and faster every single day, every single year. And so we need to be prepared for it. We need to really be thinking about how we approach it. I know that for me, the conference may be delayed and we're going to figure out all those pieces about it, but it really taught me again about how important it is to be a leader who's adaptable, who's willing to be flexible, who's willing to bring other people in and not try to solve everything on my own, so that we get better solutions quicker, faster, better. Even if the solution is we have an answer here and we're going to roll out pieces of that over time. So I would love for you to reflect on your own leadership and experiences where you've needed to be more adaptable and how you responded. And maybe go back to this list of things that we discussed, right? Like, did you acknowledge your emotions? Were you willing to be flexible and agile rather than perfect? Did you maintain clear communication? Did you use and lead with a growth mindset? Did you empower your team? However your team looks, right? Like my team has not always been people who are completely W-2, right? I've had contractors, project people who are on, we were in a project-based work. I've had part-time, freelance, all kinds of things, right? However you create team, how are you leveraging them to help you solve the problems that come up, the challenges that arise with change, and how you're leading through change. And then, of course, whether you're, how are you preparing? How are you memorializing the lessons that you have gotten from any one experience and using them to move yourself forward? So that's my big question for you. How are you preparing for the next unexpected challenge that might come your way? Time for That So Unserious. And today, climate change denial. And I might be on a bit of one because, like I just told y'all, my conference was postponed. We had to postpone because of the weather. Really have to acknowledge that climate change is real, that there is a human impact to this. Like, we cannot frack forever. We're definitely seeing that, like, there are responses from Mother Nature that are happening. And currently, our report came out in July 18th of 2024. We have a lot of climate deniers in the Congress. I think they said something like 23% of our legislators do not believe that climate change is real. They say currently 123 members of Congress are climate deniers. Among the 90 newly elected and appointed members of the 118th Congress, 18 are climate deniers. And the climate deniers in the current Congress have received $52,071,133 in lifetime campaign contributions from the fossil fuel industry. The good news here, they say the number of outright climate deniers in Congress continues a downward trend. And so we're at least seeing that, there's some acknowledgement, but there's also a lot of politicking that's happening around how we're going to address climate. We're not going to do anything until other countries do things. But what we do know is the US is large and it has a lot of impact across the world in and as a leader, sometimes you have to go the way, you have to show the way, and help other people do that as well. And so I think, it is absolutely, utterly unserious for us to pretend that there is no change happening with climate. I mean, we're watching glaciers. I think like a couple weeks ago, a glacier like broke off and we got to see the bottom of a glacier, which you would never see because they don't typically melt and break apart. Like that's not a thing that we would be expecting. We know that the earth is getting hotter and hotter. And some believe that we've already passed the point of return. And so at this point, we really need to figure out how we're going to minimize our imprint so that, we can have Earth for a little bit longer. But, just got to say, we can't pretend that our impact on Earth is not also having an impact that is changing the climate. And it's dangerous for all of us, like people who are dealing with more floods, more tornadoes, your quality of life is affected, insurance, like all these different things are impacted. And while some may want to drill, baby drill, we have to figure out when we put the brakes out on things to ensure that we all maintain a certain quality of life that doesn't require us to all sacrifice ourselves at the foot of capitalism. If you have an unserious of the week, please do share it. You can contact me at hello@nkoyospeaks.com. I want to hear what wild thing you have seen, what's something that's just irking you that you're like, this is completely unserious. I can't believe we're not doing anything about it, or that this is the way that we are responding. Hit me up. Send me your feedback also about the show. I absolutely always want to hear from you. I want to make sure that these episodes are useful, they're impactful, that they are talking about issues that are affecting you as a leader, and a leader who is leading and pushing for disruptive system shifting change, right? If you're in here and you're listening, our aspiration is that we don't just exist in a world or a system where we're frustrated that the system doesn't work for us, but that we do our part to the extent that we can mobilize and combine our talents, our treasure, our great thinking into shifting systems. That's what we want to do here. I know I've mentioned also we do have the collective, and that space is absolutely for bold, audacious leaders who are trying to shift the system, whether that's through a social enterprise or a nonprofit. That is a space for you to get brave, get the information, resources, tools that you need to shift systems, to do that while we bend the law in the direction that it needs to go so that we can actually have this moral arc point towards justice. And so if that is something that is interesting or sounds right up the alley for you, I would encourage you to get to the link in the show notes and apply to join the collective. I am, for a very short period of time, offering a free membership until the end of free admission until the end of this month. And pulling out a beta, I just want to take through a group of you, 10 to 20 of you all, on a journey to make sure that we're thinking about the stuff that you actually need to support you as you are fighting the man, fighting the system. And so I encourage you to, if you're interested, hit the link in the show notes or send me an email and get information for that. Of course, would love for you to subscribe to Nkoyo Unscripted, your weekly dose of insights at the intersection of law, leadership, and learning. We are here to really shift the way that we are thinking, grab some new tools, put them in our toolkit, and use them to design the system, design the future that we truly want to inhabit. And so if this podcast is useful to you, please make sure that you subscribe, hit the bell. We are on YouTube, Spotify, and you can listen on Apple Podcasts, but subscribe, and let's continue to go out there and do the really great things that we all are doing. I look forward to seeing you next week, where I share some more insights, some more things that we need to be thinking about as we are growing as leaders in our leadership walk and journey. And until then, go lead audaciously.